What if I told you that broadcast radio, the medium your dentist's office plays, just shipped an identity solution that connected television has spent 6 years failing to build? And what if I told you that the company that built it also owns the ad server, the exchange, and the measurement currency for digital audio? And what if I told you almost nobody in Adtech is paying attention? This is the ADOTAT Show. My guest today is John Rosso, the CEO of Triton Digital and President of iHeartMedia's Technology Solutions Group. We talk about the plumbing, the scarcity, the pricing, the AI inventory problem, and the one acquisition nobody read the press release on. Let's get into it.
She does not know about the server. The server does not need her to. Oh, the plumbing, the quiet, beautiful plumbing. Nobody writes a song about the pipes.
Today's guest is John Rosso, CEO of Triton Digital and President of iHeart's Technology Solutions Group. Triton is the company that invented server-side dynamic ad insertion, runs the infrastructure behind most of the streaming audio you have ever heard, and just figured how to pipe 800 broadcast radio stations into DSPs for programmatic buy-in. John got into the business because he wanted to be on the radio and play records. John, welcome. First question of the day. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks so much for having me.
So there's a problem with interviewing. Triton Digital does the most important but the least sexy thing in all of audio. You're basically the plumbing, the infrastructure, the ad server, the programmatic marketplace, the measurement system, the podcast hosting. Nobody talks about plumbing until the toilet backs up. Make me care. And you know a little bit about plumbing, as we talked before.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Why does the infrastructure layer matter more than the content that runs on top of it?
Well, I don't want to say that it matters more than the content necessarily, but plumbing is the thing that nobody thinks about until, to your point, it stops working. But the reality is that the plumbing in this technology business of ours is critically important, and it's the thing that enables all of the commerce that rides on top of it. I'm getting a pretty significant echo back from you. Can you hear that? I don't know if you're here. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, my earphone my earplug went in and out, so it switched to another. It's fixed now.
So I'll try to pick it up there, sort of where I left off. The plumbing is critically important to enabling the commerce that powers this entire business. And again, when it works well, nobody has to worry too much about it or think about it. But we spend most of our time and energy making sure that, to continue the plumbing metaphor, that all those pipes are clear and that the water can flow freely between supply and demand, which is our primary mission.
So I looked into the origin story of the company, and it's genuinely great. Radio stations could not stream their broadcast ads because of talent union contracts. So they replaced ad breaks with classical music, it says. 3 minutes of royalty-free Beethoven in the middle of a rock station. Andomedia, which I guess was the precursor for Triton, said, what if we place the classical music with digital ads? And that's how server-side dynamic ad insertion was born. Is that true? Has anyone ever challenged this?
No, this is absolutely true. This was really happening back in the 1990s. And it's interesting because I'm a Google TV subscriber, and every time I see them put up the video of the bumblebees or the bunnies, or the river that says, we'll be right back, I think about the days when we used to put, royalty-free classical music in between those rock songs, right? Because it's sort of the same thing. It's what's the filler you play when there's no advertising or there's no nothing you can put in place of the advertisements. And that's exactly what we did with live radio back then. When we went to commercial breaks on the air, we would play classical music on the streams because we didn't have the rights to use the voice over actors on the commercial units on the internet.
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would get full credit for the meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
Right.
Yeah, and that was true for many years.
So iHeartMedia paid $230 million for Triton in 2021. What did they buy for $230 million? Because iHeart already had Jelly for programmatic radio. They had a massive sales force. What did Triton have that was worth $250 million to the largest radio company in America?
So Triton products really fall into three different verticals, the way I think about it. And iHeart is the biggest customer of each of those, and was amongst our biggest customers even before the acquisition. So the things that Triton does include content management, and in the content management vertical, think podcast hosting, both for large enterprises and for the long tail of podcasting. Think stream hosting, so where we really started the streaming of live radio. The second vertical is advertising technologies, ad serving, and all the tools for a programmatic marketplace, including things like, brand safety tools and contextual targeting. And then the third vertical was measurement. So we started in the measurement of live streaming, added podcasting now probably, 5 or 6 years ago, and we're sort of the leader in the measurement of online audio. So content management, advertising technology, and measurement. And iHeart uses all of those things. And by acquiring Triton, they got access to sort of being first in line for development in terms of innovations and the things that we could bring to market. And it's been a great relationship. One of the benefits as a technology company in being owned by a strategic acquirer and somebody who's a customer of your technology is they drive you hard sometimes to build the things that solve problems. And in the case of iHeart, because it's really the largest and I would say the most sophisticated sales organization in digital audio anywhere in the world, we are driven really, really hard to innovate against things that our other customers, to innovate against problems that our other customers don't even know they're going to have for 2 years. So that's one of the great benefits of being owned by iHeart.
So one of the things you're most interested in and excited about is how broadcast radio will go into DSPs. You had to wire up iHeart's 800 plus stations and create identity spine for user level targeting on linear radio. Can you walk me through that, what that actually means technically? Because
Sure.
identity spine for broadcast radio sounds ambitious and impossible at the same time.
Sure. So first, you mentioned a moment ago that iHeart already owned Jelly, and that's true. Jelly is a technology that enables two things, really. First, it's the real-time insertion of advertising on a broadcast radio station. And if you've ever spent any time in radio, one of the things you'll know is that typically that broadcast spot log is locked down at least 24 hours in advance, sometimes 48 or 72. So there's rarely any sort of last-minute change happening once that spot log is locked down. Jelly bypassed all of that and enabled a near real-time replacement or ad insertion capability on broadcast radio. The second thing it enabled was a much more sophisticated way of creating a media plan on broadcast radio that was algorithmic and based off of sort of enhanced, what I would consider to be enhanced audiences. So Nielsen plus other characteristics. So you could create a more efficient plan and then distribute it in an automated way using real-time ad insertion. What Triton did when we came into the iHeart family was we built a connection between that Jelly platform that enabled real-time ad insertion and the Triton platform that made all the connections to about 50 different DSPs around the world. And by connecting those dots, we enabled a DSP through the Triton platform to trigger ads that are served through the Jelly infrastructure live onto broadcast radio. And I think we've got 7 or 8 DSPs now enabled to transact broadcast radio in that way. Now, it still uses the common currency in the radio business, which is Nielsen, but we're also building towards an identity-based solution that you referenced earlier, which is not impossible, but it's difficult to do certainly. And because broadcast radio has no return path data, it has to be a totally probabilistic solution. So there are no physical identities available for the devices that broadcast radio is consumed on, nothing like an advertising ID on those devices. So what we do is we use radio's digital listening, which is pretty considerable. The streaming audiences to a radio station typically make up anywhere from 10 to 20% of the total consumption. We use that digital listening and what we know about those listeners essentially as the seed for a bunch of data science-driven models that then create a probabilistic way to predict the listening patterns onto our identity spot. And that's how we've created that identity solution for broadcast. We call it AudioGraph. We've been doing a lot of testing with it since about September of last year and had pretty favorable results in our early tests. And we're just launching a second round of live client tests right now.
So you also said that there's real scarcity in streaming audio inventory and the rates are being bid up because of that. That is obviously a significant market signal. Demand for streaming audio is outpacing supply. What does it mean for publishers? What does it mean for the programmatic marketplace that you run?
Yeah, so certainly it's good news for publishers. And because we operate a programmatic exchange, the visibility that we have is on the inventory that those publishers present to us for sale, and recognizing that there's a whole tier of inventory from most of those publishers that gets sold directly and probably in priority, so that they're not competing with programmatic on space, on price, as you would think in sort of a header bidding environment. What's typical in the broadcast business is that the direct sold campaigns always clear first, even if there's a programmatic campaign that might have a higher price, because preserving and protecting that direct advertiser relationship is so critically important for those sales teams. So we get visibility into whatever inventory is not directly sold first. And what can cause the scarcity that we're seeing now is one of two things. Either A, less inventory available and flowing into the programmatic marketplace because our customers are selling more of it directly themselves, or B, programmatic fill rates continue to creep up and they're just stretching the inventory that's available and hitting the boundaries of the inventory that's available. And I think we're seeing both of those things going on at the same time. Our clients are becoming more and more successful in selling directly to their own advertisers, and therefore presenting less inventory into the programmatic business today than they did previously, or they're presenting it in a way where they're actually negotiating programmatic direct deals and executing them programmatically, but it's not an open market sort of transaction. Or the second thing is that there's just more open market demand that's soaking up the available supply. So we're sort of at the intersection of a couple of good trends right now that are again, working together to really create a bit of a scarcity situation, and therefore the rates are starting to get bid up naturally, as you would expect.
So you also said that most people think will get wrong about podcasting is that it's now a video-first medium. You said the future is multi-format, not a replacement of one by another. But let's look at the data. I'm going to challenge you on this. YouTube is now the number one podcast consumption platform in some surveys. Edison research showed that a spoken word podcasts are just eclipsed broadcast radio in the US. Video podcast clips on TikTok and Instagram are how shows get discovered. The industry is clearly voting with eyeballs. How are you not, and this is your own description, the old radio guy standing in front of a train?
That's funny. So first, absolutely agree with the research that has been done, and I believe it's correct that YouTube is probably the number one platform for discovery of podcasting. I think you need to look at how that shapes up across the different demos, and it is definitely highly favored by people at the very low end demographically. So let's say 18 to 24-year-olds, right? But as you get older, that is less and less true. And what we're also seeing is that folks who use YouTube for discovery also tend to listen in audio only, either because they don't actually watch the YouTube video, they listen to it, frankly, or they then subscribe in audio and consume in audio format frequently as well. The beauty of podcasting, as someone said, I didn't coin this phrase, but it's a great one. It's the thing for your ears to do while your eyes are busy, right? And that remains true. And notwithstanding the fact that we see a lot of people coming to podcasting because of YouTube, I still believe it is an audio first medium. And I think the benefit of YouTube, this is going to sound crazy, the benefit of YouTube is not necessarily that it's a visual medium. The benefit of YouTube is that it's very, very, very strong recommendation methodology and the ability for YouTube to serve you up content that it's pretty sure you're going to like. And I think even if you took away the video, let's say, YouTube's recommendation methodology would still be a powerful driver of discovery in the podcasting business.
So you said on a podcast that audio is the thing for your ears to do when your eyes are busy. That's a great line and captures general consumer behavior.
All right, I've got a big noise in the background. Maybe you're not hearing it because it's being filtered out, but give us 1 minute. I am. Well, then we'll restart. Apologies. Okay.
Oh, no problem.
Takes.
You said on a podcast that audio is a thing for your ears when your eyes are busy. That's a great line and captures a genuine consumer behavior. But why are advertisers still paying more for eyes than ears? CPMs for videos are at an all-time high while audio is not reaching the same amount. The money follows the screen. If audio is the medium you use while you're mowing the lawn, how do you compete for the budget with the medium while you use while you're sitting on the couch?
Sure. So first, once again, as to that saying, I wish I could claim that I had come up with it, but I didn't. I'll credit it to somebody else. I think it was James Cridland. But to answer your question directly, first I would challenge the assumption that audio ads transact at a discount relative to video. I think that is probably true in the programmatic marketplace. And when you look at the data that's available publicly, usually that refers to what's transacted programmatically. But I believe there is a tier of audio advertising in premium podcasting that actually transacts at quite a bit higher price point than what you see in programmatic video. And this is one of the things that, when I speak to content creators and publishers and we talk about that value of the advertising, those direct sales forces are able to generate considerably higher CPMs for high engagement, high quality podcast audio ads than they're going to get with a programmatic video fill like they'll get on most of the video centric platforms today. That includes YouTube, certainly.
Right.
But even on the others, wherever you may consume video, typically those ads are going to be, filled programmatically and potentially at a considerably lower rate than what a premium audio ad unit would go for. Now, certainly there's a tier of audio advertising that is lower priced, just like in the video world. But I'm comparing the opportunity to sell podcasting like the super special audio medium that it is at an appropriate price point, given the extraordinary level of intimacy and engagement that the audience has with the content creator. And being a podcaster, this certainly, right? And differentiating that from the more commoditized shoveling of ad impressions, if you will.
So it's something interesting you said, and I have to agree with this. It's becoming harder and harder to define what a podcast actually is. YouTube is supposedly CTV. Podcasts are now shown on Netflix. So what are we measuring? Is it if it's not a podcast at this point?
Sorry about that. Hopefully you can cut it. That's a really interesting question. And I think the word podcast has an ever-expanding definition right now. Obviously, you've seen the deals that companies like Netflix have done with iHeart and others, and now they've got a category called podcasting. And in that context, those things tend to look more like television shows, television talk shows than radio shows. As to what when
we started this show, it was going to be a video show, and then YouTube convinced me that they were the largest podcast platform, and they would promote me a little bit for the first year, and it still looks like a video show to me, but they're calling it a podcast.
Right. So I don't know.
Even though we're obviously on podcast platforms, but the vast majority of our views and listens are YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not sure. At some point, somebody out there will think of some way to differentiate those things. For the moment, it's all sort of podcasting. When it comes down to what we measure, what Triton measures audio, podcast audio, downloads, and listeners per the IAB specification. We also measure YouTube consumption for our clients. So if our clients want us to measure their YouTube published shows, we'll do that for them as well. But what we don't do is we don't commingle those things, right? So we don't take a video view and an audio download and push them together and consider that one view or one listen or one consumption. We measure both, but represent them separately.
So you also mentioned that there's a serious issue about AI-generated podcasts. It started very recently that some companies are spinning out thousands of episodes a day on niche topics. You said there's been debate on whether that content should be flagged for consumer advertisers, and the IAB is currently working on a standard. Where do you stand? Should AI-generated audio be labeled, and should advertisers be able to exclude it?
Yeah, this is a part of the business, and I guess part of the world that's evolving really, really rapidly, certainly. And I do think that, AI content labeling for the consumer is really important. When you think about the capability to create, videos that look, totally realistic, but are also totally fake is frightening.
Right.
What the implications of that are. Same thing.
Yeah, I'm getting a fake rabbi on my Facebook feed right now. And it's clearly AI, and it's trying to sell a book. Constantly, and it's all AI generated. It's just constant.
You're a sophisticated consumer. To you, it's clearly AI, but to most people, it may not be so clear that it's AI.
No. When you read the comments, it clearly isn't to most people, because the vast majority of people are arguing with the guy. And creating more.
That's right. And that's why I think that sort of content labeling is critically important. Now, the challenge is, the bad actors who want to use artificial intelligence to create those sort of deep fake videos aren't going to necessarily subject themselves to that sort of filtration. So it's going to be on the platforms and the folks who actually render those videos for us to do that and figure out some way to detect and disclose. That's, the consumer side of things. I think on the advertising side of things, that an advertiser deserves to know whether their ad is going to land in content that is created by artificial intelligence. And I think this is an area where there's probably some gray area, and we can debate what does it mean to be created by artificial intelligence, because even, your show, obviously hosted by a human, I can tell that you are not AI generated, right? And even I think a non-sophisticated user could tell you're an actual person, right? But who knows what
But then I run this through an AI that masters the content. It fixes the audio. It could show up as AI then.
That's right. So you're using AI tools to enhance a human created and curated experience. And I think that's the difference, right? And if you were a totally AI powered, pod bot, that would be a different story, right? So I think advertisers have the right to know where their content is going to land in the same way that they think around, brand suitability, right? They want to be in certain environments. They want to be adjacent to certain types of content. And I think they have the right to know that. And I know the IAB is working on standards around that. And, certainly once a standard emerges, we'll do everything we need to do to comply. But I think we're already building into our platform, the various elements needed to support whatever happens there.
So moving on, I asked you the desert island question. You wrote back, let's skip the question. That is the first time in the last 3 years that someone has flat out refused. I respect it. I'm also going to milk it for comedy. What is it about the desert island question that made you say no? Too personal, too silly, or did your comms team flag it?
No, they didn't flag it. And if I recall, it was, which 5 people would you want to bring to the desert island with you? And of course, my first reaction, well, I'd like to be with my family, but then I thought, why would I want to strand them on a desert island with me?
Bring that up every single time that someone brings their family. Why would you bring your wife and your kids to a desert island?
Yeah, that's right. And so that was my first thought. I'm like, why would I want to do that to them? And then I thought about the people that I would want to spend the time with and all my favorite people. I thought, why would I want to do that to them? So it was a tough question to answer. And, normally when the desert island question gets asked, especially for someone who started their career in radio, it's, what are the 10 desert island discs, the records you'd want to have with you, on that desert island. And I think about that fairly frequently, but not the people.
I'm gathering it's something to like ELO or something like that, right?
No, not so much ELO. I've got pretty broad taste, but so that's why I demurred on the desert island question.
And we're going to talk more about classic rock in a second. So here's the questions you did answer honestly. Your superpower is the ability to control time so you could fix your mistakes, personal and professional, which could be some fun questions there, and make more time for family and the things you enjoy. That's the most honest answer you gave me. Every CEO says they want to move faster or see the future. What is the mistake you want to fix first?
Well,
either personal or professional, or both.
Before I go into my list of mistakes along the way, I would say if you can turn back time, de facto,
you or share.
You can move faster and you can see the future, right? So you get those things anyway. No, without going into a whole list of mistakes, we've all done things along the way that in retrospect we think we might have done better or done differently. And really, I think that's kind of the point. It's the ability to go back and maybe fine tune things along the way. And as to just making more time available, there just aren't enough hours in the day or month for the things we want to do. And that could be spending the time with our families or the hobbies or other things that we want to do. Work is pretty all consuming for most of us in this industry anyway. We don't tend to be on a 8-hour day or 40-hour week, and work pretty constant. And unfortunately, that has the impact of leaving less time for the other stuff that we want to do and the people we want to do it with.
So you like classic rock and you like playing out loud. You told me it's your genre, but you cannot pick one song. I'm going to sit here, since you wanted to be a DJ at one point, and you're going to tell me the one track you put on the radio if you could.
Yeah, there's not one track. That's the problem. And I guess I sort of default to the classic rock, given, where in time and place I was born. I like a lot of different types of music. But if I had to pick one song right now, I would pick a Led Zeppelin song because that band comes to mind, given a project that I happen to be working on that's related to Led Zeppelin. And I would pick a song that is not anywhere near one of their most popular. It's called Out on the Tiles.
So you also told E.B. Moss, one of my favorite interviewers, in fact, you worked one day in television and learned that it was not for you.
That's right.
One total day. What happened on that day? Because something happened that was so clear, so definitive that you decide never to go into TV again.
So I'm sure I said that to EB sort of tongue in cheek, but my one day in television was as a teenager when I was just starting to work and, starting to think about my adult working life. And my one day of work in my one day of paid work in the television business was I was hired by the company that was known as Cablevision back then to, on an hourly basis, to work in a World Wrestling Federation pickup. Now, the WWF, as it was called before it became...
At the time, right? Before they got sued by the Pandas.
That's right. Before it became World Wrestling Entertainment. Used to go around, from town to town and take over the local, gymnasium, auditorium, or in the case of my town, the local skating rink, the roller skating rink. And they'd put a ring up in the middle and put folding chairs all around the outside, and Cablevision would come in and do the pickup. And that's how World Wrestling Federation, produced its content. And because I had been doing a high school television show the year before with Cablevision, unpaid, they decided to hire me for minimum wage to come in and essentially pull cables for that WWF event, which I did. And the real value there was not the $2 an hour or whatever minimum wage was back in the day. It was getting to be in the same room with greats like Bruno Sammartino and George the Animal Steele.
But so I want to talk about that was my
one
salad story.
One day in the television business. That was my one day in the television business.
So a little bit about the potato salad story, which I really had to get to. Your career in audio was almost, I guess, killed by a buffet. And again, E.B. Moss saved you from sitting in potato salad on the Upper West Side.
Yeah, I think I was almost killed by that buffet as, I was talking to E.B. and a few others, and sort of instinctively, without really paying much attention to it, sort of leaned back on the thing that was behind me, not realizing it was a folding table, and simultaneously almost sat in a big bowl of potato salad and knocked the whole buffet over. And it was EB who actually rescued me at the time. But I almost took her down with me into the potato salad.
What do you think this teaches us about how careers work versus what people say on LinkedIn?
I think what I learned from the potato salad incident is watch your back.
Literally.
Or your backside.
You also, like my 90-something-year-old grandmother, your mother-in-law listens to podcasts and figured it out her own without help. I had to help my mom. That means podcasting is truly mainstream. But I want to know, what does she listen to? Does she actually know what you do for a living?
I think she knows I work in media technology in some form, but probably doesn't know all the details. She knows I'm at least related to the podcasting and radio businesses. And she listens on the Apple podcast app because she has an iPhone, and it's on the home screen and it's easy to use. And I give her a lot of credit. She's 96 years old now, and she discovered podcasts on her own, and she figured out how to subscribe and listen. She's pretty technically adept, especially for somebody at 96. And I was proud of her when she told me she had done it.
So ABC Radio, which was Disney sold to Citadel. Citadel was acquired by Cumulus. Cumulus was absorbed by Westward One, and you survived all of it and landed at Triton, which got acquired by iHeart for $230 million. That is 5 corporate ownership changes in one career. You call it prevailing, and then said prevailing might be too strong a word. Then what is the right word? Because surviving that many consolidations in one industry requires either skill or stubbornness.
So, a little correction there, just in terms of the corporate consolidations that went on. So ABC Radio was acquired by Citadel. Citadel then was acquired by Cumulus. Cumulus had a division called Westwood One. Citadel had a division called Citadel Media, which was actually the ABC Radio Networks business until about a year before that acquisition. Then we lost the right to use that ABC name, so after the ABC sale. So when Cumulus acquired Citadel Media, then ended up owning what then were 2 of the 3 largest radio network operations in the country, here being the other one. So you had Westwood One, Premier, and ABC Radio Networks being the 3 big ones there. So they consolidated ABC Radio Networks and Westwood One under Cumulus ownership. And this all happened back in I want to say 2011 or so.
Right.
At that time, it became clear that they didn't necessarily need me in the role that I was playing at that time. And I had an opportunity to think about what I wanted to do with the next part of my career. Had already worked for what I considered to be some of the great radio companies in the United States, and thought this was an opportunity to maybe change focus and broaden my horizons a little bit. And I've always been a little bit technical, not super technical, but enough, and it interested me. And I left Cumulus and ended up going to work at Triton Digital, which was an enterprise software company, not a media company, not a radio company, but radio adjacent. And it was a great opportunity for me to go to work in a technology and enterprise software business and keep all of my radio friends.
So just random question. Why do you think that companies like...
Guys, we'll see you Monday.
Sorry.
Monday then?
We finished or no?
Okay, thank you. Guys.
So random question. Companies like Interrupt that went bankrupt, I think, in 2008, were they just... I'm not sure what the question is. Why didn't they survive?
So I was around at that time, certainly, and working in the radio industry, but I didn't work at Interrupt or their chief competitor, which was Katz.
Right.
Those were the two big national rep firms in the radio business. And I can't speak with specificity as to why one and the other didn't, but I can tell you the industry's better off by having one big rep firm that can represent the entirety of the radio channel in the national spot marketplace, rather than two competing rep firms that each can only represent a part of the industry and are potentially, directly competing with each other with their various parts. It just becomes more complicated for the buyer because you can't execute your campaign with one phone call or one order at that point. You're calling multiples in order to cover the whole country. So this consolidation under Katz, I think, was a great benefit to the radio industry because it created one big advocate for the radio in the national spot world.
So you're also a board member on the Radio Advertising Bureau, which is the radio's trade association. You're running the technology that's essentially digitizing radio's ad business and routing through DSP. Do some people in traditional radio see you as the bad guy?
Sure, there are plenty of people who think I'm a bad guy for who knows what reason, but I say that somewhat jokingly. Hopefully that's not true. Look, I think there are certainly people in the broadcast business who look at what's gone on in the digital media world and the automation that has become prevalent in digital media and wonder whether that's the right solution for broadcast radio. And I think the answer is yes, and it's not one or the other, but it's multiple answers to that question. I think the most successful radio stations in America have a healthy local and direct sales effort. They have healthy direct agency and client outreach. But I also think that the reality is that part of the business is moving towards automation, inevitably towards automation, right? And if you're not there, you're not going to be considered. And this is not all that different. This has happened in the industry before. There was a day many, many years ago when orders were literally taken over the phone or on the back of a cocktail napkin or however. And then there was a point at which it became mandatory to participate in, the Donovan data system.
Which is now Media Ocean.
Later became Media Bank, then Media Ocean or Strata, which is a competitor. And, those essentially were workflow automation systems that to a certain extent digitized that workflow for the radio and television industries. So this next step towards programmatic advertising in broadcast radio, I look at very much like when we all moved into, Strata and Media Bank to a certain extent. I think there will be a certain amount of maybe open market transaction happening there. Really what I think is going to be the predominant mode of transacting in the programmatic space for broadcast radio will be something that looks much more like a programmatic guaranteed, right? It's a premium medium, and those things tend to be transacted in PG deals.
So some rapid fire questions before we go. Whatever comes to your mind. Favorite radio station you listened to as a kid?
Favorite radio station I listened to as a kid. So I'll reframe that a little bit because the radio station that made me want to get into the radio business was WNBC in New York. No, it was owned by NBC, WNBC 660 AM. Later became WFAN when NBC sold it to MS Communications.
Right, I remember that. It became like a baseball station or sports, right?
It became a sports station. But WNBC had Don Imus in the morning, who I would listen to every day. And eventually they had hired Howard Stern in afternoons. But just a great massive radio station. I grew up out on Long Island where there were some local, FM music stations that I enjoyed listening to, but WNBC was the big station from New York City that I listened to.
Most overrated thing in audio advertising.
Most overrated thing in audio advertising. Wow. Maybe I'll reframe that one a little bit as well and not say overrated, but maybe overvalued or overused, which is really, really super precise audience-based targeting. And, I was around when we digitized audio and was around when we made it possible to transact it programmatically and was around when we made it possible to basically, transact it based off of audiences through third-party data primarily. And the very first thing that we saw happen when we enabled that was people started putting all sorts of crazy targeting onto audio campaigns. And, I still recommend to people, the sellers in the business to be careful not to try to, apply too fine a filter to targeting. It's not like display advertising, right? Where you, virtually endless supplies of that inventory. And honestly, whenever that inventory starts to get scarce, people figure out ways to manufacture more, right? Audio is not like that. There is a limited supply of audio. It is very hard to just make more and attract an audience to it. So I'm always cautioning people not to overvalue targeting.
What's the most underrated?
That's a really great question. I think there's an undervaluation right now in the digital audio streaming world. I do think, as I said earlier, podcasting is commanding a really fair price on a CPM basis for most of its inventory. I do think the opportunity, notwithstanding the fact that prices have come up in the programmatic exchange, I do think that live radio and audio streaming is still undervalued.
Last question before we go. The one sentence you'd want the audience to remember from this conversation.
The one sentence I want the audience to remember from this conversation, that the audio business is and continues to be an extraordinary driver of engagement and growth for the advertisers that use it. It's, the history starting over 100 years ago in broadcast radio. There's been a great evolution over time into streaming and now into podcasting. It's incredibly intimate and incredibly effective. And I think we're finally starting to see that, that's being valued as the share of marketers' spend on audio is starting to increase. Nowhere near the share of ear or the share of hours a day of consumption that happens on audio versus other media, but we're starting to see things moving in the right direction. So I know that was way more than one sentence.
And now the hardest part is where we force everyone to dance.
I am not much of a dancer.
9 seasons in, and somehow the lights are still on, which honestly shocking given how many people I've pissed off.
And that is the show. John Rosso, thank you for sitting down with us, for being honest about the plumbing, and for not flinching at the harder questions. Big thanks to our sponsors who make all of this possible. Troutman Amin LLP, the law firm advertisers actually call when the regulators show up. And Incremental.com, the measurement people doing the work the rest of the industry is still arguing about. This is the Season 8 finale. We will be back on Monday, June 1st, with Season 9. More guests, more frameworks, more honest conversations about a category that does not get enough of them. Subscribe so you do not miss it. This is the ADOTAT Show. Stay bold, stay curious, and know more than you did yesterday.
They said, dude, tone it down. I said, babe, have you met me? They said, maybe don't name names. I said, that's literally the whole point of the show. So VP somewhere is sweating right now, reading this through their PR team. Hi, Jessica, tell your boss we said hi. No intimidation, no PR mediation. Hold the line, 'cause baby, we're just warming up. We're the publication of record for the people with the money. That's right, the checkbooks read us. ADOTAT, and we aren't done. Not even close. We're just getting started. Buckle up. Getting started. No intimidation whatsoever. We aren't scared. We are here. And my agencies read us, the brands read us, the holding companies pretend they don't. But baby, we see the analytics, we know who's clicking. Hi, Group M. Hi, Publicus, we see you back there. 'Cause if you got the money, you're already reading. And if you don't, you wish you were, 'cause we're just getting started with a publication of record for the real ones, baby. The ones writing the checks. That's us. That's us. We aren't done. Not even a little. We aren't done. We're just getting started. Y'all already know we aren't scared of literally any of you. We are here. My voice is clear. My voice is clear. My voice is clear. And loud and a little annoying, and we love it. Season 9, baby. The publication of record for the people who actually move the money. Be good to each other out there. The truth lives here. ADOTAT! We'll see you next week. Probably unless I get sued.